Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the AltMed podcast. Thrilled to have you with us today. I've got my co-host as always, Mitch Kurtz. G'day, Mitch.
Hello, hello.
And we are absolutely thrilled to have Gary, the CEO of Relief, join us today. Gary, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Andrew. How are you, Mitch?
Very well, thank you. Excited to have this chat.
Yeah, no,
Relief's definitely
inviting me.
been a pillar of the medicinal cannabis scene in Australia since I don't know, since we always got into it. We always knew of Relief, so yeah, really excited to have this chat.
Yeah, great. No. So yeah, happy to give you a bit of a story about Relief. But look, I mean, do you want me to sort of give you a bit of a background, just where we got going? And look, I actually had kidney cancer about 5 years ago, and I was quite sick for a year or so. I lost my right kidney. And so I had major surgery and on opiates from that. And then I had some complications after that operation, had another two major surgeries after that. So in about an 18-month period, I was sort of in and out of hospital quite a lot. And yeah, and sort of probably firsthand experienced, taking opiates. And, at the time I was, quite in quite a lot of pain because I, had an organ removed and had my stomach opened up quite a few times. So yeah, at the time, I suppose without opiates, I would have been in trouble. But, so I still think there's a place for them. But they are, very physically addictive and, not good for your body. And I really felt that. And that's probably where I got introduced to medical cannabis. And look, at the time, I was trying to access it, trying to find doctors. This is going back about 4 years ago, just after medical cannabis was legalized. And I eventually found a doctor, and it was quite difficult to find one, and they were very expensive. And then once I got a script, I was approved and got a script. It was actually then nearly impossible to get a script filled. So that's sort of where I suppose the whole idea for Relief was sort of born out of. And I have another business partner, Scott McDonald, who has two kids with cerebral palsy. And so he approached me around that same time. And I'd worked with Scott in the past in another big marketing company. And he asked me if I could help him get a medical cannabis clinic off the ground. And yeah, just looking into it at the time, it sounded fairly reasonable. It wouldn't be that difficult to do, but that's sort of where the whole sort of journey started, I suppose. And yeah, and only looking at a clinic as a silo, it is sort of only half the picture. You sort of need to be able to get it filled as well. So yeah, Relief was sort of born out of that, patient access, making it simpler, easier without the stigma, trying to bring the price down so it was affordable. We also managed to, get Medicare for our consultations, which made it a bit more cost effective for patients. And then started setting up accounts with all of the different, medical prescribers, like the, Canadian companies and some of the local companies. And so, yeah, so Relief sort of, it was all born out of that.
Amazing.
That is
Yeah.
I'm actually curious how you got that script filled back in the day. Was it some sort of special import? I'm just thinking about the timelines. That would have been right at the beginning of, legally accessible medicinal cannabis.
Yeah, look, I ended up finding a pharmacist that was working with one of the suppliers, and look, it was probably a little bit later on because I had my kidney out sort of 4 years back, and it was probably about 18 months after that. So the cannabis industry had sort of started, but it was very slow at the time. And yeah, and then, obviously the industry's matured a lot now, but there's still a lot of red tape. The industry is still probably maybe treated a little bit unfairly. If you look at a scheduled medicine, whether it's, CBD or THC, it's often sort of classified as this really bad, dangerous drug, which you've got to jump through a lot of hoops to get, where you can go to a doctor and get a script for opiates, which could kill you. And you can get that script very easy and get it filled straight away without any approval.
Yeah, you can drive on it. It's
Yeah.
something
So, yeah.
I have to say, when we first heard, people saying, "Oh, you got to talk to Gary McKenzie" and all this, we know there's a whole history with you in the music industry, and then you found your way to cannabis. I suppose cannabis and music are bedfellows from way back. But in speaking of, just the red tape and cutting through that, I do think that your business Relief has really tried to tackle that difficulty around access. So you may be able to just talk to us about how you conceived the idea and what the sort of the patient flow looks like.
Yeah, so look, after we sort of come to the conclusion that we really needed to have pharmacists working with us alongside of doctors, we sort of started recruiting a lot of medical experts. So we brought in a number of professors, doctors, pharmacists into the group and surrounded ourselves with smart medical people, sort of all had common minds around cannabinoids. And yeah, we work with another pharmacist in Adelaide who's a compounding pharmacist, and he was fairly heavily involved in looking into the different benefits of CBD at the time. And yeah, so a lot of that, I suppose, pharmacy side was born out of that relationship. And there's a guy called David Krisky, and David is now on our board also as a director. So yeah, so when we sort of went through our legal, I suppose, work after we opened up St Kilda, we actually established a franchise group. So Relief essentially are Asia Pacific's first cannabis franchise group now. So we have franchise agreements around pharmacy and also medical centres. And a big part of our model is putting clinics and pharmacies on high streets so they're easily accessible. It advertises our brand without actually talking about cannabis, which is a taboo, and you're not allowed to talk about anything to do with the medicine, under sort of that guidelines they have in Australia. So you have to be very careful there about what you can say and can't say. And so I think just again having our clinics and dispensaries on high streets where they are easily accessible, and making sure that we comply with all the regulatory authorities and do everything the right way. Relief's tried to sort of be an exemplar in that area and trying to make sure that we're working within the guidelines, but also helping patients and making it easy for them to get scripts and easy for them to get those scripts filled.
Yeah, it's definitely it definitely is taboo in Australia. It's very different to what you might see overseas when you can actually go into Aldi, for example, in Europe and just buy a CBD plant. Plant, medicine, whatever, or products, just lifestyle products. It's interesting. I do remember the first time I went into Relief in St Kilda, and I saw a bevy of products that, hemp face creams and that kind of thing. And you do get the notion of what it's about, which I think is great. It's a great brand. It's very recognizable. Out of curiosity, the expansion plans, I've seen a few, new notifications on LinkedIn and thereabouts and in the news. I think it was Bentley, and it was recently established. Can you tell us more about the expansion and the franchise side of things?
Yeah, so look, through our sort of franchising rollout, we actually have 3 brands within the group. So Clinic and Dispensaries is our main brand that we started with. We're also moving into the pets industry, so we're setting up Relief Pets. And we also have established a lifestyle brand, which is being run out of London, called Mull Cafe. And Mull Cafe is headed up by a guy called Neil Cartwright, who just recently joined the group. And Neil's very well respected from the music industry. So Mull Cafe has a music division, it has a clothing division and a cafe division, which we're sort of focusing on terpene-infused cocktails and non-alcoholic drinks. And that's more about an educational side of the industry. And but yeah, so look, with Relief Pets, very similar to clinics and dispensaries. It's it's using similar medicines. It's just the dosages are different for dogs and cats. But yeah, look, essentially, I think plant-based medicines, cannabinoids, are a whole new area of healthcare for people and for animals. And why shouldn't we sort of, I suppose, try and help everyone in that regard? But the franchising rollout that we're doing at the moment, we're planning to set up approximately 100 sites across Australia over the next 3 to 4 years. And we've just, as you said, we've just finished. We opened in Bentley, a few weeks back, and we also at the moment are building up in Queensland. So we're setting up in Fortitude Valley, in Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast, Mooloolaba, and also Noosa Heads. And we're also building in a place called Morayfield, which is sort of halfway between Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. We have interest in Adelaide, Perth, and Canberra, and also down in Tasmania, and we're doing a few more in Victoria. So I would say within the next 12 months, you'll probably see roughly 20 odd, Relief sites, whether they be a clinic and dispensaries or possibly Relief Pets. And the business is also expanding at the moment into the United Kingdom. We've set up a team in London, and we're also just established ourselves in New Zealand. So we're planning to open up in Auckland in New Zealand within the next 6 months or so.
What a boom. It's the bricks and mortar approach. I mean, there's now a few of the sort of digital cannabis prescribing clinics that, we see offering alternative plant-based medicines. But I suppose the benefit of that, of actually having physical franchise network, is just that patient experience. They get to, face-to-face, speak to a doctor, go through that. Whereas, we've seen other models pop up that are very, in, out, very fast, all sort of, telehealth. And it's a totally different patient experience. I imagine.
Yeah, look, we're very careful about, I suppose, that patient experience. And, I think the pharmacy side of it is just as important as the doctor side of it. So, our doctors and pharmacists work very closely together. So that really helps that patient experience and patient feedback. Our pharmacists are obviously working closely with all the suppliers and understanding what medicines are coming out, and we're getting first-hand feedback from all our patients on, the outcomes of what they're taking. So, I think that whole face-to-face model is very important. It's that traditional medical model. We do still do some telehealth, but our lion's share of our patients are done face-to-face in our clinics.
So imagine with the kind of doctor and pharmacy model working well together, you'd be exposed to quite a bit of some amazing data. Is there any trends you might be able to share with us, just very broadly or generally? Like say is it kind of more geared towards oil type products? Are you seeing like flour be something that would be regularly dealt with, or what are the kind of things you're noticing being kind of on the ground, front line?
Yeah, so look, I suppose when we started back, early last year, it was 100% CBD oils and some THC oils back then. But look, the industry is definitely maturing and progressing, and we see a big trend in flower now. So there may not have been that sort of product line available in Australia 12 odd months ago, but there is definitely a larger increase in patients that may start on oil and then move on to flower, or they were using flower in between their medications as a sort of a vaping sort of breaker in between the oils. But yeah, I think if you look at trends internationally as well, flower probably end up making up around 60% of the products that are being prescribed, and potentially 40% in oils.
Yeah, amazing. And in terms of, I know we have a few doctors that watch this podcast, and I'd just be curious for all doctors that aren't involved in medicinal cannabis currently, but are maybe thinking about it. Their patients are asking them, and they've probably currently been referring their patients to quote unquote specialists. How does that education piece look for somebody wanting to get into the cannabis prescribing for a doctor?
Yeah, so look, we've heavily invested into that whole education side for medical practitioners, and our research and education is headed up by Professor Kylie O'Brien in Australia, who's set up an online college that we're launching called the International College of Cannabinoid Medicine. The college will actually be based internationally, but it's like a video streaming platform, so we can bring doctors through an education pathway. We've recruited around 20 international experts in medicinal cannabis that have access to a lot of data and outcomes on different patient reporting. And yeah, we think that's really a good way to get our doctors and new doctors into the industry and up to speed on how to prescribe and the dosages and all that sort of thing. So yeah, I do think doctor education is a very important part, as well as consumer education as well. But that whole education pathway to get doctors into the industry, because they're not taught about cannabinoids in medical school, is a very important part of our business model.
Yeah, amazing. And how long would you say it takes for a doctor to go from, cannabis newbie, if you will, to somebody who's, confident in prescribing? You would have obviously had a few doctors come through the Relief kind of system now. And
yeah, look, I think because they're dealing with peers here that are doing the same work, they can get up to speed relatively quickly, and we can give them that sort of first-hand education. And but look, I would say, you know, anything from a month to 3 months, depending on the individual.
Yep.
If they've had previous integrated medicine experience and sort of already understand the science around cannabinoids, it can be quite quick. But if they're just straight off, you know, from prescribing Western medicines and never done it before, I would probably say, you know, 2 to 3 months to get them up to speed where they feel very comfortable and you know, and become a specialist or a subspecialist in what they're prescribing.
Is that, would that be the same for, I'm assuming it would be vets for pets. Would that be the same kind of situation in terms of, going?
Yeah, most definitely. Like, vets, I suppose, again, similar to doctors, they're not necessarily trained in cannabinoids yet. So again, same issues with education, and you know, I suppose that's why the veterinary industry is a little bit lagging behind the medical industry, purely because there really isn't a lot of individuals that understand, you know, how much CBD do you give a dog, or if a dog's in pain or got anxiety, or a cat's in pain. So it all comes down to, I suppose, you know, leaning on those individuals that have been those sort of trailblazers, and then getting the information out of them, and then trying to sort of work how we can look at different outcomes related to animals or people, and you know, and see what's working, what's not. Obviously, internationally, there's a lot more, I suppose, experience than what there is in Australia. Because Canada or parts of the US, as an example, they've obviously been doing this thing for a lot longer than we have here. So a lot of our experts are based in those territories, and that's why we're, I suppose, sort of working more on an international basis now, so we can sort of strengthen our position here.
I've got a question, actually. I'm really glad to see that Relief is trailblazing with respect to, you know, providing an access pathway for medicinal cannabis for pets. It's something that seems to be talked about a lot, but to my knowledge, the relevant regulator, so we have, for those listening uninitiated, we have the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, which is responsible for the regulation of human therapeutic goods. But we have the APVMA, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority, which is responsible for pet medicine. Now, I haven't checked in a little while, I preface that, but I think at last check, the APVMA was not playing a very active role in having discussions about access pathways. And so I note that there are holistic vets around the country who are able to provide an access pathway through compounded medicine. But have you, got any thoughts about what it's been like being a pioneer in that space?
Yeah, look, it's still pretty early days for us in Relief Pets, but you're right. I think it's sort of lagging a fair way behind where the TGA is at. But I think a lot will happen with the industry over the next 6 months, because there are quite a number of individuals now looking into the space. But yeah, look, it's one of those things that, you know, I suppose to get a business like this in this industry off the ground, it's understanding all that regulatory legal framework and making sure that, you know, you comply to that, so, you know, no one gets themselves into any trouble. But yeah, I do think, you know, probably in 12 months' time, there'll be a lot more sort of framework around what's going to happen for medicines. I think currently it's more down the compounding side of things, like you mentioned. But yeah, I think that will change in time.
Yeah, I can see pig's ears, CBD pig's ears on the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then we can, then you'll see requests coming in for lists of what kind of conditions dogs are being treated for and that sort of thing. So I'll be fascinated to see, but I definitely see a role for the regulator to really play here. So lots of activity to come there. My next question, I do like to sometimes, ask controversial questions. It's only controversial in a regulatory sense, so I'm just going to hope that I stay within the boundaries set by the TGA. But I just wanted to ask, you mentioned your own personal story with the Relief, pardon the pun, that you got from medicinal cannabis. But I'm just curious, given that there is such an expansion with the existing St Kilda and Bentley and everything, have you been getting some patient feedback from the doctors at the Relief clinics about how medicinal cannabis is working for some patients. And I do preface that by saying that I know that it's a case-by-case scenario and it's for doctors to determine whether or not cannabis is an appropriate treatment. But for those who are being treated, have you heard what's some of the feedback that you've had from the clinics?
Yeah, look, I think, the reason that the industry has taken off on a global basis is the fact that it does seem to work for some individuals, may not work for everyone.
Yeah.
So you can't say that medicinal cannabis is for everyone, but look, we are getting some very good outcomes. A lot of people, changed their lives, got them off opiates or got them off other, medicines that weren't doing much for their bodies. So, as you said, it is an individual thing, but, we are getting some great outcomes from, some of the medicines that are being prescribed with individuals. It's hard to go into too much detail, as you said, but I just think that if you have a look at how the industry's progressed internationally, that's starting to happen here now in Australia as well. And there's obviously higher patient numbers being approved every month. So
10,000, I think, last month.
Yeah, I think there was some issues where everything's dropped off a little bit in August. So, in April, but that may be why it was higher. But I just think that that tells a story in itself. It wouldn't be accelerating in the way it is if it wasn't working for people.
Yeah. Are we allowed to talk more openly about approved therapeutic goods? Because if we are, I just want to take this moment just to say that when I got put on Endone at the start of this year, it was the worst experience of my life. I had, constipation, a lot of other side effects that I won't go into too much detail about, but I'm glad I can speak freely about that and glad I was able to drive whilst, severely under the influence of painkillers. But anyway.
Well, technically, we have 2 approved cannabis therapies now.
Yeah.
Sativex and Epidiolex. But I don't know if you're allowed to talk about that. Are you?
Yeah.
Not really. I don't think you're allowed to talk about any drug specific, but look, obviously.
Good thing I didn't.
Yeah. Sorry, Endone.
That's right. But driving conditions are what they are. I know there's some politicians trying to change those laws. It does seem to be very unfair that you can drive on some Schedule 8 medicines and not on others.
Yeah.
Getting a level playing field for medicinal cannabis would be a good thing for the public. And it seems a bit ridiculous that someone can take opiates and drive legally, but they can't do it on medicinal cannabis. If obviously you don't want to drive if you're impaired by anything, opiates or cannabis, but assuming that patient's not impaired by it, it could have been, 2 days or a week ago or whatever, or, even 12 hours ago, they're still not going to be very impaired or not impaired at all from what they've taken. The medicine probably has a 6-hour cycle. So it seems a little bit grossly unfair that, people can't drive if they've taken medicinal cannabis.
Yeah.
Even CBD, because it has that full entourage effect, with a small component of other cannabinoids in CBD, if it is the whole plant, even that, they're still not allowed to drive because you're not allowed to have any THC in your body whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think that's the holy trinity of questions that new patients especially ask is driving, as you mentioned, access, which is one of the things you're seeking to increase or are increasing actively. That last question that we find often, what's your perspective on price as it currently stands? It's traditionally, comparatively to other medicines, even opioids, cannabis obviously comes in at very expensive currently. What's your outlook on pricing? What have you seen in the industry already? And where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously it's a non-PBS medicine, medicinal cannabis, so it's not subsidised by the government whatsoever. There's a lot of components to the industry, so there's a lot of costs involved. There's handlers, there's storage, there's freight, there's doctors, pharmacists, there's growers, manufacturers. So there's a lot of different people wearing different hats along that daisy chain, which obviously add quite a lot to the price. Look, I think until price comes down further, it is out of reach for some people, and then maybe that's one of the things that will change over time with volume, and it'll enable companies to bring their margins down because they're doing higher volumes. But it's still probably another year or so away from seeing that, I think.
Well, I also know that the one of the things that, and look, it's, really only available if you've got private health insurance. And even then there's certain funds that don't get around, supporting medicinal cannabis. But I know that some funds, including the one that I'm unfortunately paying my premiums month on month, but it has an extras cover that includes non-PBS listed medicines. And so you can get something back for that. But I'm not sure whether or not you're seeing, patients reporting any of that through the Relief clinics.
No, we haven't, to be honest. Look, I think that whole PBS thing's a long way away. Like it's an expensive exercise for companies, and it takes years. So to the best of my knowledge, I think there's one medicine, Epidiolex or whatever, that's on the PBS, but that's for children, mainly for epilepsy. So it's not really a mainstream medicine that are being prescribed to normal, patients coming in for chronic pain and anxiety and the like.
Yeah. And shout out, by the way, sorry, I feel like credit where credit's due. Shout out to Medibank for being one of the funds that does support non-PBS.
I'm sure they're listening.
Yeah, I promise I have no financial interest in Medibank or anything, but I know that some funds have, really turned away from medicinal cannabis, and others are trying to embrace, the medicines that their fund members are on. So I have been able to subsidize some of that, but of course it's everything with insurance is capped, and, it's, you got to still go through the whole claims process. So it's not easy, I think, is the point still.
And Gary, I do have a question, actually, seeing, as I said, you're the coal face, local versus import. What's your stance on that kind of debate at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think I have a preference probably for Australian product. It's probably cheaper for a start. There's less costs associated to it. There's no freight requirements, no exchange rate requirements. So yeah, there's a little bit less red tape around local products. But look, at the end of the day, if the product's produced in an environment that's controlled, and it should be the same theoretically. But a lot of it just comes down to, I suppose, is it grown in the ground or is it indoors or greenhouse? There's different ways of extracting the medicines, and that may relate to the, if it's grown in an outdoor environment, might have a better terpene profile compared to something that's maybe grown indoors. So look, Australian products, I think, will probably come out on top eventually. Like local products, always usually trumps sort of, something that's imported, but I think we're still a long way off from seeing the majority of being Australian. I think a lot of the Canadian companies have came into the market early in Australia that sort of dominate some of that sort of market share. But I think as prices come down, that's when you'll probably see more Australian products, being the norm.
And I guess another question that's very pertinent to you would be that what happens if and when we start to legalize or loosen the straps around, especially CBD. I'm not sure about THC anytime soon.
I have a feeling I know the answer to this. All the Relief clinics get rebranded to Mull Cafe. Is that?
No. Well, that'll be separate brand.
Yeah, but what's your vision? Obviously there's been a lot of controversy around the S3 down scheduling and it being available technically, but nobody having a product and this kind of thing. Yeah, what's your take on that situation?
Yeah, I just think that's a stalling tactic to delay the right of CBD being able to be on the shelf for a consumer. Like, if you have a look at looking at the UK, Europe, US, Canada, CBD is available. As you said, you can go and buy it at Aldi, but here it seems to be very much in the dark ages, and we're still probably waiting at least another 18 months to 2 years now. Companies need to invest in clinical trials, do proper trials to get it Schedule 3. It's probably at least 12, 18 months worth of work and a very expensive cost to do that. Now, no guarantees that the TGA won't change the goalposts again, and then they'll have to go through the whole process again. So it's something that's probably not that attractive for companies to invest in because of the unknown and just the time factor to do it. But yeah, it's disappointing that patients can't access on the shelves low dose CBD now when it is available in the rest of the world, or the majority of the rest of the world. And it's proven to be safe. So yeah, I don't know why we have to have these sort of regulations so tight here, but that's up to the regulators. I suppose they have their reasons.
Well, I think I have a vision that one day, Mitch, you and I are going to be doing this podcast series, and in Joe Rogan style, we'll have CBD drinks visible on the videos. But for now, definitely not the case. But I think to that point, certainly for some patients that we've spoken to and that are in some of the forums, they go, well, I can't get it off the shelf at my local pharmacy or wherever, or at Aldi. So what's the next best thing? Oh, I'm just going to get it off the internet, or I'm going to get it black market. And of course, we don't cast any aspersions about that, other than to say that we've definitely heard of cases where people think they're buying CBD and it's not CBD, or it's got a different cannabinoid content to what was stated on the label. So that comes fraught with its own inherent risks as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely, I think that there's also the legal, especially as you were talking before, that driving situation where you could have thought you were just having CBD, which is not being tested for, and then, have a swab and, turns up that you're actually not in a good spot with the law. Not to mention you could be getting far more cooked than you had anticipated.
Yeah, but it does seem to be grossly unfair that someone could lose their license driving from taking CBD because it had a nanomillimeter of THC in it, which had no effect on their mind whatsoever. So yeah, it's Australia's still got quite a long way to go in that regard. I suppose it's hard to say when things will become more easy for consumers here, but we're probably looking at a couple of years.
Well, I've got a question on that, and maybe, I don't know if Mitch will have any more queries, but we do ask our guests on this show about when they think recreational is going to happen, and I if it does, but let's say, what's 5 years from now, 2026, Australia has a referendum for legalizing cannabis for recreational use. Do you reckon it passes at that time, or do you think we're still further away than that?
I think it'll definitely pass by that time. Look, my own, I suppose, feeling about when things will change is probably not this coming federal election, but the next one. So, somewhere between 3.5 to 4 years, I think you'll see some change in Australia. So, I'd be very surprised if it didn't become a big election issue in as I said, not the next one, but the one after that. And just had a look at what happened in New Zealand. It missed out by 1%. Australia's not too dissimilar to the Kiwis. So, I think within 12 months, even if you had a referendum, we'd probably get in.
I think we're more progressive potentially than the Kiwis on that front. It's my feeling. It's based on nothing else, but
politically maybe one of the few things that we might be, but we'll never know until we have a referendum. But just based on hearing you talk that through, Gary, I'm thinking if you've got any spare time, I think you should consider running in whenever that federal election is. And Mitch and I'll be glad to wear the T-shirts. And I was going to say we'll run a grassroots campaign, pardon the pun, but yeah, Gary McKenzie, PM.
No, I think I'll be avoiding the politics, Andrew.
Yeah, much safer place to be. Well, I didn't have any more questions. I'm sure I'll think of some after this. But Mitch, did you have any more for Gary, or can we let him out of the hot seat?
No, it's been really informative. I love what you guys are doing down there. Really putting cannabis or putting alternative medicines in the spotlight in Australia, and giving people the option to kind of see that, as you said, on the high street, and normalize that and remove some of the stigma and taboo. So yeah, it was great.
I think it also in the paper, we've read about Relief in the papers, and you did an interview recently with Husey, and there's been that media around it because people love the story. They like actually seeing physical stores. So we are watching on and just really admire the work that you guys are doing. And it was a pleasure chatting with Kylie O'Brien, I should say, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. So I'm sure we'll do this again at some point.
No, thanks a lot, guys. They're all good stuff with your podcast. Keep it all going, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon. But yeah, thanks, Mitch. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Gary. It's been a pleasure.
Bye bye. Thank you.